It started with 3 words that changed everything. Go to hell. That's what Rachel Summers, a sharp-tongued tenant from Brooklyn, spat across the courtroom, her anger slicing through the air like a blade. The words weren't meant as drama. They were real, raw, fueled by months of bitterness, unpaid rent, and a broken friendship that had once felt unbreakable. Her former landlord, Eli Torres, sat frozen, his face red with humiliation, his jaw trembling with a mix of rage and regret. The courtroom audience murmured. Even the bailiff looked uneasy, but one person didn't flinch. At the bench sat an experienced female judge, her silver hair gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam her gavel. She simply looked up, and in that moment the temperature of the entire room dropped 10 degrees. Miss Summers, she said, voice calm as stone, you just told someone to go to hell. Unfortunately for you, this courtroom isn't run by devils. It's run by facts. The crowd went silent. Rachel blinked, realizing she had just made a fatal mistake, because what came next wasn't punishment. It was dismantling. Slow, precise, and merciless. And by the time this judge was finished, the woman who thought she could win with attitude would learn the one lesson pride hates most. That in the court of truth, your mouth can build your own prison. The courthouse was buzzing that morning, not with high-profile lawyers or criminal drama, but something smaller and strangely more personal. The kind of case that seemed simple on paper but burned with emotion underneath. It was Rachel Summers versus Eli Torres, tenant versus landlord. Rachel had arrived first, heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor, her sunglasses still on, though they didn't hide the fury behind them. She looked like a woman who'd come to win, or at least to make sure no one forgot she'd been wronged. Every movement was deliberate, flipping her hair, tapping her nails against the table, rolling her eyes at the clerk's instructions. Eli arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a folder so thick it seemed to hold every mistake Rachel had ever made. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that came from lack of sleep, but from months of arguing, pleading, and being ignored. He wasn't a corporate landlord or a millionaire, just a man who owned 2 small buildings and was now staring down the cost of eviction, repairs, and pride. When the bailiff called, "All rise," the energy in the room shifted. The experienced female judge, silver hair pulled back neatly, entered with that signature aura that quieted every whisper without needing to say a word. She didn't need to perform power. She was power. "Good morning," she said, sitting. "Case number 714B, Torres versus Summers. Both parties present?" "Yes, Your Honor," Eli said respectfully. Rachel didn't respond right away. She was too busy checking her reflection in her phone's camera. The judge's voice cut through her silence. "Miss Summers, are you prepared to proceed?" Rachel sighed dramatically, setting her phone down. "I guess." The judge didn't blink. "Then let's begin." "Mr. Torres," the judge began, "you're suing Miss Summers for unpaid rent totaling $4,200 plus property damage to the apartment. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Eli replied. "She hasn't paid rent for 4 months, and when she moved out, the place looked like it had been hit by a tornado. Broken window, cracked tiles, holes in the wall. That's a lie!" Rachel snapped before he could finish. "That place was falling apart before I moved in." The judge lifted her pen slowly, then set it down. "Miss Summers, you'll have your turn to speak. For now, do not interrupt." Rachel folded her arms and leaned back, glaring at Eli. "Whatever." The judge's eyes flicked up, sharp as glass. "That attitude won't serve you well here," Eli continued, voice calm but firm. She refused to let the repairman in, ignored notices, and when she finally left, she told me she wouldn't pay another cent because she didn't believe in landlords. The courtroom chuckled quietly. Rachel's eyes flashed. "That's out of context." The judge's tone cooled the room instantly. "Then provide context when it's your turn." The judge turned a page in her notes. "Mr. Torres, did you provide written warnings regarding unpaid rent?" "Yes, Your Honor, 3 notices. I even tried to work with her. She told me I was, and I quote, a greedy parasite who feeds on other people's paychecks." Gasps echoed softly from the audience. Rachel threw up her hands. "You're making me sound like a monster." The judge didn't look up. "No one is making you sound that way. Your words are doing the work themselves." Rachel blinked. Not out of offense, but out of surprise. She wasn't used to being outmatched in tone. When it was her turn to speak, she leaned forward, confidence returning. Your Honor, this man is lying. The apartment had mold, broken plumbing, no heat half the winter. I was practically living in a dump. Why should I have to pay full rent for that? The judge nodded slightly. Do you have photographs or maintenance requests showing these issues? Rachel hesitated. Well, no, not exactly. But I told him about it. Eli interjected quietly. She texted me once saying the sink dripped weird. That was it. I sent a plumber. She never answered the door. The judge raised an eyebrow. Miss Summers, is that accurate? Rachel crossed her arms again. I don't recall. You don't recall the maintenance on your own home? Her voice faltered. I was busy. With what? The judge asked simply. Rachel froze. Her defiance flickered. Life. The judge leaned forward, eyes steady. Life doesn't exempt you from responsibility, especially when it involves someone else's property. The more Rachel spoke, the deeper she sank. Every explanation twisted into contradiction. Every denial opened a door for Eli's calm, meticulous record-keeping. He produced signed lease agreements, text logs, even photos dated with timestamps. She produced nothing but indignation. Your Honor, she said at one point, her voice rising, he's just trying to make me look bad because I stood up for myself. You don't understand what it's like dealing with landlords who think they own you. The judge's tone cut through the air, sharp but measured. Miss Summers, no one in this courtroom owns you, but you do own your choices, including the consequences of them. Rachel's jaw tightened. You sound just like him. The judge didn't react. That's because truth doesn't change depending on who says it. The audience murmured again. Quiet admiration, nervous laughter. The bailiff silenced them with a glance. As the hearing went on, Eli produced the inspection report from after Rachel moved out. The damage was extensive. A cracked window, stained carpet, and graffiti scrawled inside a closet. 2 words in red marker, no masters. Did you write this? The judge asked. Rachel hesitated. Maybe, I was angry. And did you pay to repair it? No, she said flatly. Why should I? He kept my deposit. Your deposit was legally used to cover your unpaid rent, the judge explained patiently. That's not fair. Fairness, the judge said, leaning back, isn't always the same as comfort. It's accountability. And accountability, Miss Summers, is what you've been avoiding. Eli's voice softened. I didn't want this, Your Honor. She was like family at first. I gave her a discount on rent because she was struggling. I even helped her move in. But she turned hostile the minute I asked her to pay on time. Rachel's eyes rolled. Oh, please. You just liked playing the hero. Eli's face reddened. You told me you'd rather burn the place down than give me another dime. That's not heroic, that's threatening. Rachel smirked. Figure of speech? The judge's gaze locked onto her. You use a lot of those, don't you? Rachel frowned. What do you mean? Phrases that sound clever until someone writes them down and repeats them in front of a judge. She swallowed hard, realizing the tone had shifted, not against her, but onto her. The judge set her pen down and folded her hands. Miss Summers, I'm going to be direct. You seem intelligent, articulate, and unafraid to speak. But somewhere along the way, you confuse loudness with logic. I've seen people like you, smart enough to win, too angry to do it the right way. Rachel's eyes burned. But not from defiance this time. From shame she didn't want to feel. Eli watched silently, unsure whether to feel vindicated or sorry. Now, the judge continued, I want you both to take a deep breath. Because this isn't just about money. This is about respect. And right now, there's none between you. Silence. The sound of the air conditioner filled the space. Mr. Torres, she said finally, you've made your case clearly. The court recognizes the damages and unpaid rent. But before I issue a ruling, I want to give Miss Summers one more opportunity to explain herself. Rachel blinked. Explain myself? Yes, not to defend. To explain. There's a difference. She hesitated, words catching in her throat. He just treated me like I was nothing, like I was a burden. Did he ever threaten you? No. Did he ever refuse repairs? No. Did he ever insult you? Rachel's voice dropped. Not really. He just reminded me of people who used to. The judge nodded slowly. So you brought someone else's ghosts into this courtroom and tried to punish them using him. Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had no comeback. The judge leaned forward. You told Mr. Torres to go to hell. I heard it myself. That wasn't frustration. That was contempt. And when contempt becomes your default language, you stop seeing truth as truth. You see it as an enemy. Rachel's eyes welled slightly. You think I'm a bad person? The judge shook her head. No, I think you're an angry one. And anger can make saints look like villains. Eli lowered his gaze, guilt flickering across his face. She wasn't always like this, Your Honor. She used to be kind. The judge sighed. Then perhaps both of you forgot who you were when you started this. The clock ticked quietly in the background as she gathered her papers. We'll adjourn until tomorrow for review and judgment. I expect both of you to think about what this fight has really cost. Not in money, but in dignity. She stood. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell with a heavy, echoing crack. Rachel sat still for a long time after everyone left. Her pride, her armor, her venom, all of it had been dismantled not by force, but by truth spoken softly enough to sting. She looked at Eli as he packed his folder. You really kept all that paperwork? He didn't look up. Yeah, because I knew someday you'd make me prove I wasn't the villain, she whispered. Maybe I was. He stopped. You still don't get it. There were no villains, Rachel. Just choices. And with that, he walked out, leaving her alone with nothing but the reflection of a woman who had built her defense out of noise. Outside, the experienced female judge paused near the courthouse doors, watching the gray sky. Her clerk approached. Long day, Your Honor? She smiled faintly. No longer than usual. Think she'll learn something? The judge looked back toward the empty courtroom. If she listens to herself, maybe. She adjusted her robe, straightened her notes, and stepped into the rain, ready for the next storm waiting behind another courtroom door. The next morning came with a haze that clung to the courthouse steps. Reporters milled outside, curious about the viral clip that had already made the rounds online. The moment Rachel Summers told a judge to go to hell. It wasn't supposed to leave the courtroom, but someone's phone had captured it, and by dawn, it was trending under courtroom meltdown. The internet loved drama. The comments were brutal. Entitled much? This woman really told a judge that? Good luck ever renting again. Rachel saw them all. Every word, every meme, every stranger laughing at her downfall, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't want to fight back. She just wanted to hide, but she couldn't. The hearing resumed at 9 sharp. When Rachel walked in, she looked different, smaller somehow. No sunglasses, no smirk, just quiet exhaustion. But the courtroom had a long memory, and whispers followed her like a shadow. Eli was already seated, his paperwork neatly stacked. He didn't look smug, just ready for it to be over. The experienced female judge entered right on time, her robe immaculate, her silver hair catching the overhead light like frost. She took her seat without looking at either of them. Good morning, she said, voice steady but cool. Let's continue where we left off. Rachel spoke first, her tone softer. Your Honor, I want to apologize for yesterday. The judge nodded once. You don't owe me an apology, Miss Summers. You owe the truth. I was angry, Rachel continued. I shouldn't have said what I said. It was disrespectful. That's a start, the judge replied. But anger without reflection is just noise. What have you learned since yesterday? Rachel hesitated. That maybe I've been wrong about some things. Be specific, the judge pressed gently, that I use my anger to feel strong. But it just makes me alone. The judge's expression softened, not with sympathy but understanding. That's a lesson people spend lifetimes avoiding. Let's see what you do with it. Eli adjusted his glasses and handed another document to the bailiff. This is an estimate for the property damage repairs. Totaling $2,300, the judge reviewed it silently. Did you provide these estimates to Miss Summers? Yes, Your Honor, twice. Rachel nodded weakly. He did. And did you pay any portion of it? No? Why not? She stared down at her hands. Because I thought if I ignored it long enough, it would go away. The judge set the papers aside. Denial may delay a problem, but it never deletes it. In law, silence can be louder than confession. Rachel exhaled shakily. I didn't know what else to do. Did you ever try talking to him civilly? Rachel glanced at Eli. No. Why? Because I didn't think he'd listen. Eli spoke softly. You never gave me the chance. The judge interjected before emotion took over. Let's focus on the facts. Miss Summers, you claim the apartment was unlivable. Do you have any documentation, photos, or witnesses to support that? She bit her lip. No, Your Honor, just my word. And Mr. Torres has inspection reports from city maintenance showing the property passed with no violations. Correct? Yes, Eli confirmed. The judge looked at Rachel. When your version of reality has no evidence, it becomes belief, not truth. As the hearing continued, Rachel's defensiveness started to crumble under the weight of her own inconsistencies. Every sharp retort she tried died halfway to her lips. At one point, she blurted out, "He's not perfect either." The judge didn't flinch. No one in this room is perfect. But perfection isn't on trial. Integrity is. The words lingered. Even Eli looked shaken by them. "Mr. Torres," the judge continued, "you said you viewed Miss Summers like family. Why did that change?" Eli paused. "Because she started treating my kindness like weakness. I gave extensions, lowered rent, helped her move in. But the more I gave, the more she took." Rachel whispered, "That's not true." He looked right at her for the first time. "Then why did you stop paying the moment I stopped saying yes to everything?" She didn't answer. The judge's pen clicked once, a small sound, but it cut through the silence. "It seems to me," she said, "that both of you mistook generosity for permission. And when boundaries appeared, respect vanished." By midday, the emotional tide had shifted entirely. What had begun as another petty courtroom squabble had turned into something raw. Two people unpacking years of resentment in front of a bench that refused to take sides. "Mr. Torres," the judge said, "you mentioned earlier that Miss Summers refused entry to repairmen." "Why?" Eli sighed. "She said she didn't like strangers in her home," Rachel spoke up. "Because the last time someone came in, they stole my charger." The judge's eyebrow arched. "Your charger?" "Yes." "It's about principle." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Miss Summers, your principle cost you months of rent and thousands in damage. Sometimes our need to be right becomes more expensive than the thing we're fighting over." Rachel's shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad." "That's how consequences work," the judge said. "They don't need your permission." Eli shifted uncomfortably. "I just want to move on." "I'm tired, Your Honor." Rachel looked over, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "I know." The judge watched them both for a moment. "Mr. Torres, I believe you. And Miss Summers, I believe you're capable of better. But believing in someone doesn't erase what they've done." Rachel blinked away tears. "I'm not asking for that. I just want a chance to make it right." "Then do so through action, not attitude," the judge said. "Words are currency here, but they lose value without proof of intent." Rachel nodded slowly. "You're right. I usually am," the judge said dryly, earning a ripple of laughter from the room that even Rachel couldn't help but smile at. It was the first crack of light in a case built entirely from shadows. When the afternoon recess came, Rachel stepped outside, away from the reporters, the murmurs, the cameras. She sat on the courthouse steps, staring at her reflection in a puddle. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Eli passed by holding a coffee cup. He stopped, hesitated, then handed it to her. "You look like you could use this," she blinked. "Thanks." They sat in silence for a long minute. Then she said softly, "I shouldn't have said what I said to you." Or to her. "I know," he replied. "You were angry." "I was stupid," she corrected. He smiled faintly. "There's a difference?" She laughed under her breath. "Apparently not." He looked out at the parking lot. "You know, I wasn't mad about the money. I was mad you stopped talking to me like I was human." Her eyes dropped. "I stopped talking to myself like that too?" The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was healing. Slow, tentative, real. When court resumed, the judge noticed it immediately. The way Rachel sat differently. The way Eli's posture wasn't as defensive. "Seems you both used recess wisely," she said. Rachel smiled faintly. "We talked. Did it help?" "I think so." "Good," the judge said. "Because I was about to remind you that most wars end with conversations, not victories." The rest of the session flowed differently. Rachel didn't interrupt. Eli didn't gloat. And the judge, though stern, allowed space for something few courtrooms ever see: humility. She summed up the day's evidence neatly. "Miss Summers, your testimony lacks documentation. Mr. Torres's evidence is consistent and thorough. That points to credibility. However," she added, "I believe your remorse is genuine. And that matters." Rachel nodded, her voice low. "It is, Your Honor." "Then prove it tomorrow when I render judgment," the judge said. "Actions are louder than apologies." As the session ended, the crowd dispersed. Reporters shouted questions, but Rachel ignored them. She and Eli left together, not side by side, but not as enemies either. Inside her chambers, the judge watched through the blinds, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Her clerk entered quietly. "Think this one will stick?" he asked. The judge tapped her pen against her notes. "If it doesn't, life will teach her again. It always does." "Do you ever get tired of being the one who has to teach the hard lessons?" "See." She looked out at the gray skyline. "No," she said softly, "because some people need to hear truth louder than they hear their own excuses." She closed the case file and set it aside, knowing tomorrow would bring the final act, where pride, guilt, and justice would all meet on the same stage. The third and final day dawned crisp and unnervingly quiet. The courthouse, normally filled with chatter and shuffling papers, felt different, like it knew a verdict was coming that would echo far beyond rent and receipts. Rachel Summers stood outside before entering, staring at the old courthouse seal etched in stone. It read, "Truth stands when nothing else does." She traced the letters with her eyes, her chest heavy. She wasn't the same woman who had walked in 3 days ago. The rage had cooled, replaced by something sharper, awareness. And awareness, she was learning, was far more painful than anger ever was. When she stepped into the courtroom, Eli was already there, quietly waiting. His stack of papers neatly aligned, his expression unreadable. He looked older than he had on day one. Not in years, but in weariness. It wasn't victory he wanted anymore. It was release. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." The experienced female judge entered, robe flowing like authority made human. She sat, adjusted her glasses, and looked at them both. "You may be seated." Silence settled over the room like dust. 3 days, she began. 3 days of testimony, evidence, and emotion. "I've heard plenty of noise in my courtroom before, but this case, oddly enough, has been about silence. The things you didn't say, the truths you didn't face." She flipped through her notes, each page crisp and deliberate. "Let's review. Mr. Torres, you provided evidence of non-payment, 4 months of unpaid rent. Receipts, notices, texts, everything consistent." "Yes, Your Honor," he replied. "Miss Summers," she continued, "you provided no written complaints, no photographs, and no witnesses." "Only your statements," Rachel nodded quietly. "That's true," the judge looked up. "And yet, for the first time in a long while, I believe those statements mean something. Because yesterday you stopped defending and started reflecting." "That's rare." Rachel blinked, taken aback. The judge continued. "However, reflection doesn't erase reality. It clarifies it. So here's the reality." She leaned forward slightly. "You lived in a home for 4 months without paying rent. You damaged property. And when confronted, you retaliated with disrespect. Not just toward Mr. Torres, but toward this court." Rachel swallowed hard. "I know. I believe you do," the judge said. "And that's why this moment is so important." The judge folded her hands. "When you told Mr. Torres to go to hell, you revealed something far more than anger. You revealed fear. Fear that admitting you were wrong would make you weak." Rachel's eyes glistened. "It's hard to admit that." "Of course it is," the judge said. "Pride is a fortress, but one that collapses the moment truth walks in. You've been living in that fortress for too long." The courtroom was still. Every word waited. Eli watched her, not with resentment, but with something closer to understanding. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Torres, you've carried your own share of bitterness. You may have been right on paper, but righteousness doesn't grant you immunity from empathy. You said she was like family once. Family doesn't mean enabling, but it does mean compassion. Do you still have any left for her?" Eli hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, I don't hate her, I just want peace." The judge's voice softened. "Good, because vengeance and peace can't live in the same room." She straightened the stack of documents before her. "Now, to the matter of judgment." Rachel's breath caught. "Based on evidence," the judge began, "the court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Torres, for the full amount of unpaid rent, $4,200, and an additional $2,300 in property damages." Rachel closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the number. The judge continued, "However, the court acknowledges mitigating factors: your lack of legal representation, your emotional state, and your apparent willingness to make amends. Therefore, I will allow a structured payment plan over 12 months, contingent on consistent proof of income." She paused, then added, "Failure to comply will result in an immediate judgment enforcement. But if you complete the payments as ordered, this case will be marked as settled and satisfied in full. No future garnishments, no lingering penalties." Rachel looked up, eyes wide. "You're giving me a chance?" "I'm giving you responsibility," the judge corrected. "The difference between a second chance and a lesson is what you do with it." The words hung heavy in the air. Eli exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. "Thank you, Your Honor," the judge nodded. "Mr. Torres, you've demonstrated patience throughout this ordeal. But I'll remind you, justice isn't permission to gloat. It's an obligation to grow." He nodded again, humbled. "Understood." Then she turned back to Rachel. "Before we close, Miss Summers, I want you to say one thing. Not to me, not to him, but to yourself. Why did you come here?" Rachel hesitated. "To fight. And what did you find instead?" She blinked, her voice trembling. "Myself," the judge smiled faintly. "Then today wasn't a loss. It was an arrival." The bailiff stood ready for adjournment, but the judge wasn't finished. She removed her glasses, her expression thoughtful. "You see," she began, "this courtroom isn't about punishment. It's about perspective. Every case I hear, I ask the same question. Who will walk out of here better? The one who wins, or the one who finally understands why they lost?" Her eyes moved between them. "Today, I think it's both of you." Rachel's tears fell freely now. She didn't bother hiding them. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. The judge shook her head. "Don't thank me. Just live differently. Start with that." As the gavel struck, a sound of finality filled the room. Not the cold clang of punishment, but something closer to closure. Reporters tried to push in as the doors opened, but the bailiff blocked them. This moment wasn't for the cameras. Rachel stood, wiping her face. Eli approached her carefully. "Hey," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I forgive you." She looked up, stunned. "You do?" He nodded. "Holding a grudge would make me no better than the person I was when this started." She let out a shaky laugh. "You sound like her," he smiled faintly. "Guess she got through to both of us?" Outside the courthouse, the city noise returned. Cars honking, vendors shouting, life moving forward. But Rachel stood still for a moment, breathing it all in. For the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't feel like the world was against her. She pulled out her phone, scrolling past the hateful comments under the viral clip. She didn't delete them. She didn't defend herself. She just closed the app and whispered, "You don't get to define me anymore." Eli joined her at the steps. "Coffee?" he asked. She smiled softly. "Only if I pay this time. Deal." They walked off together, not as friends, not yet, but as two people who'd stopped seeing each other as enemies. Back inside, the experienced female judge sat alone in her chambers. The noise of the day had faded into the hum of fluorescent lights. Her clerk entered quietly, carrying the final docket. "Long week," he said. "They always are," she replied without looking up. He hesitated. "You ever think you go too easy on people like her?" The judge smiled faintly. "No, the law can punish anyone. But teaching someone to respect it, that's harder. And worth the effort." She closed the file marked Torres versus Summers and placed it on a growing stack labeled Resolved. Her gaze drifted toward the gavel on her desk, a symbol of authority, but to her something deeper. "Most people think this is power," she murmured. "It's not. It's a reminder that every voice deserves to be heard, even the ones that start with anger." That evening, the courthouse emptied, and the city lights flickered to life. Rachel, now back at her small apartment, began cleaning. It was almost symbolic, wiping away the chaos she'd lived in, throwing out the clutter she'd once used as armor. She found an old sticky note on her fridge that read, "Don't let anyone tell you what to do." She smiled at it, then tore it in half. For the first time, she realized freedom wasn't doing whatever you wanted. It was doing what was right, even when it was hard. And miles away, Eli sat at his kitchen table, signing the final check to repair the apartment. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Rachel. Thanks for not giving up on decency." "You didn't have to," he typed back. "People only change when someone believes they can." Good luck, Rachel. In another quiet corner of the city, the judge left her chambers under the streetlight glow, briefcase in hand, the faintest smile on her lips. Because for her, This wasn't just another case closed. It was proof. Proof that even the loudest chaos can find peace when truth finally gets the floor. The verdict had been rendered, the cameras gone, and the courtroom now belonged to silence. But for Rachel Summers, silence was no longer her enemy. It was a teacher. Weeks passed since that day when the gavel fell, and for once, her life wasn't a constant battle. There were no fights in her inbox, no angry texts, no rent notices crumpled on the counter. Just space, empty, uncomfortable, liberating space. She had taken the judge's words to heart. Responsibility, not redemption. So that's what she did. She got a part-time job at a local diner, cleaning tables and taking orders. Hardly glamorous, but it was honest. Her hands ached at the end of every shift, and yet that pain felt better than the guilt she'd carried. It was a kind of repayment to the universe. Sometimes she'd catch herself remembering that moment in court, the judge's steady gaze, the way she spoke truth without cruelty. There had been something terrifyingly fair about her. Every time Rachel wanted to complain, she'd hear that voice again. Life doesn't exempt you from responsibility. And so, she paid. Bit by bit, month after month. Each envelope she mailed to Eli Torres was a small confession of who she used to be, and who she was trying to become. Meanwhile, across town, Eli was rebuilding too. The apartment she'd left behind had been repaired. New tenants moved in, the walls freshly painted, the carpet replaced. But there was something about it that still carried her energy. Those words scrawled in the closet. No masters. He had painted over them. But sometimes when the light hit just right, he could almost see the faint outline beneath the white. He didn't resent it anymore. It reminded him that people are never just villains or victims. Most are both, depending on the day. One evening, while balancing his books, he noticed something odd. Rachel's payment had come early. The envelope was neat this time, her handwriting careful, deliberate. Inside wasn't just a check. There was also a small folded note. Thank you for not letting me keep lying to myself. You were right, I did use anger as a shield. I'm learning to live without it. Hope the apartment's treating someone better now. Eli smiled faintly, folded the note back, and tucked it into the drawer beside his lease contracts. He didn't need to respond. Some messages didn't need answers. They just needed acknowledgement. The world, as it always does, moved on. The viral clip that had once made Rachel infamous eventually faded beneath the next scandal, the next controversy, the next stranger's 15 minutes. But not for the experienced female judge who presided over it. Judge Briggs, quiet, resolute, and timeless, had heard thousands of cases, but every now and then one stuck with her. The Summers case was one of them. She remembered the trembling apology, the moment anger cracked into honesty. That was the kind of justice she believed in, the kind that didn't end with a sentence, but with transformation. One afternoon, while reviewing her next docket, her clerk walked in holding a stack of mail. "You've got another thank you letter, Judge," she smiled. "Let me guess. Someone who swore they'd never step foot in my courtroom again?" He chuckled. "You know it." She took the envelope, opened it, and read quietly. "I don't know if you remember me, but I told you to go to hell once. I think about that every day. Turns out hell isn't a place, it's a mindset. And you pulled me out of it. Rachel Summers." The judge's eyes lingered on the page. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she folded the letter neatly and set it beside her gavel. Her clerk raised an eyebrow. "Do you ever write back?" "Sometimes," she said softly. "But not this time. She doesn't need my words anymore. She's found her own." 6 months later, Rachel pushed open the door to her new apartment, a small, sunlit place overlooking the river. The rent was modest, the walls unblemished. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, paid on time. Every month, a stack of receipts sat neatly pinned to her fridge. Proof. Evidence. Not of guilt anymore, but of growth. She brewed coffee, opened her notebook, and began drafting something new, a business plan. She wanted to start a cleaning service. Ironic, she thought, considering how messy her life had once been. But she knew what it meant to rebuild, and she wanted to help others do the same. She smiled to herself, whispering, "Clean starts are underrated." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Eli, just saw your name in the city permit registry. Starting your own business?" She laughed softly. Of course he'd see it. "Rachel." "Yeah." Guess I learned a thing or two about responsibility. Eli. Good for you. If you ever need an office to clean, I know a guy. She replied with a smiling emoji, then set her phone down. It was funny, she thought. The man she'd once cursed out in court was now the first person she'd consider a client, and maybe, someday, a friend. That night, rain returned to the city, the same kind that had fallen during the trial. Rachel stood by her window, watching it streak the glass. She thought about the judge again, the way she'd commanded a room without shouting, the way truth had rolled off her tongue like something sacred. That voice still lived somewhere in Rachel's mind, but now it wasn't judgmental. It was guiding. The difference between a second chance and a lesson is what you do with it. She whispered it aloud, almost reverently. What I do with it? Her reflection looked back at her, softer than before. She wasn't perfect. She still had bills, regrets, and a reputation to rebuild, but she wasn't broken either. She was proof that humility wasn't defeat. It was freedom. The next morning, the courthouse was open as always. Another day, another docket of humanity. Judge Briggs stepped into her chambers, setting her coffee down beside her gavel. Outside her window, the skyline shimmered under the pale dawn. Her clerk entered with the morning's first file. Domestic dispute. Looks messy, she sighed. They always are. Want me to prep the transcript? She nodded. And get me the case notes from last month. I want to remind them what truth sounds like, he smiled. You never get tired of this, do you? She looked up, eyes calm, voice steady. How could I? Every day I watch people hit rock bottom, and every once in a while I get to see them climb out. That afternoon, between hearings, the judge visited the courthouse cafe for her usual black coffee. As she waited in line, a familiar voice called from behind. Excuse me, Judge? She turned. It was Rachel, nervous, smiling, holding a paper cup of her own. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rachel said softly, I didn't expect to run into you. The judge smiled faintly. Life has a way of putting people back in front of their lessons, Rachel chuckled awkwardly. I sent you a letter. I know, the judge said. I read it. Did you believe me? The judge's silver hair caught the cafe's light, her gaze warm but unwavering. I didn't need to believe you, Miss Summers. You already did that yourself, Rachel exhaled, smiling. Thank you. For everything, the judge nodded once. Keep going. They exchanged a small handshake. No gavel, no courtroom, no judgment, just mutual respect. Two women, once adversaries, now bound by a moment of shared truth. Weeks later, as the city moved on from another news cycle, Rachel's business began to grow. Summer Solutions wasn't flashy, but it was steady. Clients trusted her. Word spread. People liked her honesty, her discipline, her quiet empathy, the same traits she'd once thought made her weak. On the anniversary of the trial, she sent one last payment check to Eli, labeled final installment. Inside, she included a note. Debt cleared. Both kinds, he smiled when he opened it. No bitterness. No leftover resentment. Just quiet closure. As autumn arrived, the judge sat at her desk late one evening, sunlight fading behind the courthouse dome. She closed her casebook, rubbed her temples, and glanced at the small collection of letters she kept from people whose lives had collided with hers. She picked up Rachel's again. Read it once more, then whispered to herself, Go to hell, huh? Guess sometimes you have to walk someone through it before they find their way back. Her smile lingered as she turned off the desk lamp. Outside, the courthouse lights glowed against the night, a beacon of order in a chaotic city. Inside, one woman's redemption quietly folded into another day's work, a reminder that justice doesn't end with a gavel. It lives on in the lives it changes, because some stories don't end in punishment. They end in proof that people can change, that truth can heal, and that even the loudest anger can be transformed into something quieter, truer, stronger.